Sit back and enjoy 2 hours of fascinating facts you didn't know. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Let's get started. A leopon is a hybrid animal that results from crossing a leopard and a lioness, and it is not Photoshop. This cross has occurred in captivity when both species live together in zoos. Leopons usually inherit the larger size of the lioness and the spots of the leopard, although they are extremely rare in nature. A man named Walter Summerford was struck by lightning 3 times during his life. Sometime after he died, lightning also struck his grave. What luck! The Romans used to whiten their teeth with urine. It really worked, but I do not recommend that you try it. Urine contains ammonia, a compound that can act as a cleaning agent. In fact, in ancient Rome, it was collected and taxed to be used in laundries and other domestic processes. Leeches have 32 brains. In reality, they have 32 nerve ganglia distributed along their bodies, and each one functions as a small control center that coordinates movements and responses. This segmented system allows them to move and react, even if one part of their body is damaged. When you look toward the constellation Sagittarius, you are directing your gaze toward the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way. In that direction, there is a supermassive black hole called Sagittarius A star, around which millions of stars orbit hidden behind dense clouds of cosmic dust. In 2012, the department store company Walmart organized a contest in which the rapper Pitbull would perform at the Walmart store that received the most likes on Facebook. Obviously, trolls organized, and the store that ended up winning the performance was located on the remote island of Kodiak in Alaska, the most isolated Walmart they could find. Male kangaroos flex their muscles to impress females. Before fighting or courting, they lean back on their tails and tense their arms to look bigger and stronger. This behavior is part of their dominance display and helps avoid real fights if the rival decides to back down. The famous fog in the game Silent Hill for PlayStation was actually not to give the game style. The reason it was added was so that it would not be visible how the world was generated very slowly in front of the character. Chris Evans turned down being Captain America several times because accepting a contract for 10 movies and all the fame that comes with it caused him fear and anxiety. When he finally accepted, he had to go to therapy. The world record for the largest pineapple in the world was set in 2011 when Christine McCallum presented her pineapple measuring 32 centimeters long that weighed more than 8 kilograms. To prevent cheating on college entrance exams in Uzbekistan, on the day of the exam, the country's internet connections are completely shut down for 5 hours. What about everyone else who is not taking the exam? What did they do to deserve that? According to a study that was conducted, dogs truly like the high-pitched and playful tone of voice that people use when talking to them. Lactose-free milk can last up to 5 weeks longer without spoiling than whole milk, the regular kind. But that is before being opened, because once you open them, both will spoil in 3 or 4 days. Crows can recognize human faces and can communicate with other crows if they believe a human may be dangerous. They have also been seen using improvised tools to obtain food. According to a survey conducted among airline pilots, 56% of them admitted to having fallen asleep at some point while flying. The data comes from studies on fatigue in commercial aviation, where long shifts and time zone changes can affect rest. That is why there are strict protocols, cockpits with more than one pilot, and rules about maximum flight hours to reduce risks. In the 1830s, ketchup was sold as medicine. Those who sold it claimed it was a cure for indigestion. People with blue or light-colored eyes can develop a greater dependence on alcohol than people with brown eyes. This has already been confirmed, but researchers still have no idea why it happens. Elmo from Sesame Street once testified before the United States Congress in 2022. Elmo knows where you live. It was discovered that there is a rust-eating bacteria that is devouring the wreck of the Titanic, and it is believed that in just 20 years there will be nothing left. Sounds like the perfect script for Titanic 2, The Return of Jack. Fish also cough. Although they do not do it like humans, they make abrupt movements of their gills and mouths to expel particles, parasites, or debris that obstruct their respiratory system. This reflex helps keep their gills clean, which are essential for extracting oxygen from the water and surviving. In 2008, in Austria, bras dating back to the medieval period were discovered. They were made more than 600 years ago. There is a space treaty that prohibits all nations from trying to claim ownership of the moon. No one can own the moon. It is the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, promoted within the framework of the United Nations. This agreement establishes that no country may appropriate the moon or other celestial bodies, and that space must be used for peaceful purposes and for the benefit of all humanity. The sky beam, the beam of light that points into the sky coming from the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas, the one shaped like a pyramid, attracts so many insects that a mini ecosystem has formed there, with species of moths, bats, and even owls. The number of combinations in which you can scramble a Rubik's Cube is almost equivalent to the number of atoms estimated to exist in the observable universe. People who have dark eyes actually have light eyes underneath a layer of melanin that gives them the dark color. The color depends on the amount and distribution of melanin in the iris, not on additional blue or green pigments. When there is little melanin, light scatters and produces lighter shades. With a higher concentration, the iris appears brown or dark. When frogs are eating, they blink a lot. When they blink, their eyes sink in and help push the food toward their stomach, and that is why they blink so much. Of every 4 species that exist in the world, 1 is a beetle. There are many different beetles. This group of insects, known scientifically as Coleoptera, is the most diverse on the planet, with hundreds of thousands of described species and many more yet to be discovered. They have adapted to almost every ecosystem, from tropical rainforests to deserts, playing key roles as decomposers, pollinators, and pest controllers. 7% of Americans believe that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. This figure comes from a survey conducted by the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy some years ago. Although many experts pointed out that online surveys can include joking responses, the data went viral as an example of curious misinformation about basic foods. Many farmers in Botswana began painting eyes on the backsides of cows to prevent lions from continuing to eat them. The strategy works because lions prefer to attack by surprise and avoid prey that appear to be watching them. Field studies showed that painted cows were attacked far less frequently, turning this simple and inexpensive solution into an effective conservation measure. The first photo ever uploaded to Instagram was taken by the company's co-founder, Kevin Systrom, on July 16, 2010. The photo shows a dog. It was taken in Mexico near a taco stand. An indigenous tribe in Guyana, made up of 9,000 people, reported illegal logging on their lands after they managed to capture the activity with a drone they built themselves by watching tutorial videos on YouTube. The first console to include internal memory was the Sega Saturn in 1995. It had approximately 1 megabyte of storage. The Hong Kong subway is the most efficient in the world. Trains arrive on time 99.9% of the time, and the entire system is managed using artificial intelligence. In Peru, there is a billboard that creates drinking water directly from the air. It was installed in Lima, a city located in the desert, and uses technology that captures ambient humidity to condense and filter it. Under suitable conditions, it can produce up to 25 gallons of water per day for nearby communities. If you add up the 12 languages in which Overwatch is dubbed, a total of 84,000 lines were recorded. The lines in this game are a very important part, quickly becoming memorable. Tom Kenny, the official voice of SpongeBob, appeared in the video Tonight Tonight by Smashing Pumpkins, along with his wife, 2 years before he began voicing the famous character. Pirates did not actually look for gold, silver, and jewels. What they stole most were commercial goods such as furs, spices, sugar, dyes, tobacco, and that kind of boring stuff. If you see bees coming to headbutt you without stinging you, you better run, because that is the way Africanized bees warn people that an attack is imminent if they get too close to the hive. Until 2008, Walmart de Mexico was still paying its employees with vouchers redeemable only in Walmart stores. Clock hands move from left to right because in the northern hemisphere, the shadows on sundials rotate in that direction. The first European mechanical clocks took that apparent movement of the sun as their reference. In the southern hemisphere, the shadows move in the opposite direction, but the standard had already been established. Once, Nikola Tesla became addicted to gambling and games of chance, which caused him to lose all the money for his studies. He had to drop out of school. In Japan, some foreign television programs, such as Bob the Builder, had to be modified because the characters had 4 fingers. A 5th finger was added because having 4 fingers implies that they belonged to the Japanese mafia. Once the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States took a Soviet space shuttle during the night, they dismantled it, studied its features, put it back together, and returned it without the Soviets noticing. There is a Starbucks inside the Central Intelligence Agency in Virginia, United States. The difference compared to all the others is that writing customers' names on the cups is prohibited for security reasons. People who speak two languages usually make better decisions and think more rationally in their second language. Various studies in psychology have observed that when using a learned language, the emotional load of certain words is reduced, which can decrease impulsive biases and encourage a more detached analysis. This effect does not mean being more intelligent, but rather processing information with greater emotional distance. The main currency of exchange in prisons stopped being cigarettes. Now it is instant noodles, that is, Maruchan soup. In Germany and in Austria, it is not a crime to attempt to escape from prison, since it is considered a human instinct to want to be free. The same applies in Mexico. Seriously. The name of the country Argentina comes from the Latin word for silver, argentum. The first Europeans who arrived thought there was silver in abundance, and that is why they named it that. The deepest artificial hole on the planet is 7.5 miles deep and is in Russia. The most we can dig or drill is only 21.5 miles, which is just the Earth's crust. Beyond that, it is impossible, because rock at high temperatures cannot be broken. So forget about the hole you were going to dig all the way to China. There are more people in the world who have learned to speak English than those who speak it as their native language. It is estimated that non-native speakers far outnumber those who have it as their first language, since it is the dominant language in business, science, aviation, and the internet. That is why it is considered the global lingua franca today. The first glimpse of the far side of the moon was achieved in 1959, thanks to an image captured by the Soviet probe Luna 3. It was the first time humanity was able to observe the hidden face of the satellite, since the moon always shows the same side to Earth due to its synchronized rotation. The images were low resolution, but they marked a milestone in space exploration. The three most expensive Olympic sports to practice are shooting, sailing, and equestrian events. An Olympic shooter can spend up to $1,500,000 a year training for the games. The fastest that sound can travel under normal conditions is through diamond at 26,835 miles per hour, while in normal air, it travels at 767 miles per hour. Apparently in the movie Need for Speed, based on the video game of the same name, no digital computer effects were used. A study from Harvard University stated that not having friends harms your health in the same way that being a smoker would. Research on social isolation has found that chronic loneliness is associated with a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, depression, and premature mortality. Some analyses compare its impact to factors such as smoking several cigarettes a day, highlighting the importance of maintaining strong social bonds. The shortest commercial flight in the world is only 2.8 kilometers long and lasts just 47 seconds. The plane takes you from one island to another in Scotland. There will come a point when helium will be so scarce that floating balloons will no longer exist. It is a non-renewable resource. Helium forms slowly through radioactive processes inside the Earth and becomes trapped in natural gas deposits. When it is released into the atmosphere, it is so light that it escapes into space, so its loss is practically irreversible on a human scale. Coyotes use their howls to conduct a kind of census to know how many of them there are. If the howls are not answered automatically, their urge to reproduce increases to repopulate the packs. It must have been a problem when they ran into Cara Delevingne howling in the forest. It is estimated that out of every 12 million spam emails sent, only one receives a response. This data comes from studies on large-scale phishing campaigns, where attackers need enormous volumes to obtain minimal results. Although the success rate is extremely low, the near-zero cost of sending them makes even a few responses profitable. When J.R.R. Tolkien sold the rights to film The Lord of the Rings, he specifically prohibited Disney from being involved at any point. Very good there. In the Japanese version of Super Mario Kart, Peach and Bowser drink from a bottle of champagne during the celebrations when a race ends. Those animations were removed in the version released in other parts of the world. Sony sold its waterproof Walkman inside water bottles to prove that it really worked. This presentation was in stores for a very short time because people drank the water. Chewing gum has the same effectiveness in waking up the mind and is considered better for studying than caffeine, but no one knows why. There are people who can inflate balloons with their ears. In reality, what they do is expel air through the ear by voluntarily contracting certain middle ear muscles connected to the eustachian tube. It is not common and requires practice, but it demonstrates the unusual muscle control that some people can develop. Some classic castles in Japan have floors that were designed to make noise when someone stepped on them, to prevent anyone from sneaking in undetected. Not even a ninja could pass through there. The versions Pokemon Gold and Silver, which came out after Pokemon Red and Blue and Pokemon Yellow, were planned to be the last Pokemon game when they began development. In fact, they included the entire Kanto region in addition to Johto as a kind of ambitious farewell. The success was so great that the franchise continued expanding for decades. 75% of the food produced in the world comes from only 12 plants and 5 animal species. Among the plants are crops such as rice, wheat, and corn, which form the dietary base for much of the world's population. As for animals, cattle, pigs, and poultry account for most of the production, showing how dependent our diet is on a small number of species. Prairie dogs have such complex communication that they can make very detailed descriptions of predators. For example, they can have a way of saying, "man with a gun." Crayola means oily chalk. It comes from the French word clay, chalk, and ola, from oil. The name was created in the early 20th century by the wife of one of the company's founders, combining those roots to reflect the waxy texture of the product. Over time, Crayola became one of the most recognized crayon brands in the world. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, or PUBG for short, broke the record for the most people playing simultaneously. It was 1,342,857. Yogi Bear and other Hanna-Barbera cartoon characters wore collars. They did it on purpose so the animators could work less. That way, they only had to draw the head in each frame when the characters were speaking. Walt Disney Parks and Resorts is among the largest buyers of fireworks in the United States due to the daily shows in parks such as Disneyland. The main buyer of explosives in the country is the United States Department of Defense, intended for military use. In 2012, Cookie Monster mentioned in an episode of Sesame Street that the rumor that his name was going to be changed to Veggie Monster and that he was going to stop eating cookies had to end, because if people did not stop spreading the rumor, it would ruin his reputation. Almonds and peaches belong to the same family of plants. Both are part of the genus Prunus, which also includes plums, cherries, and apricots. In fact, the almond is not a true nut, but the seed of the fruit, very similar to the pit of a peach, which explains their botanical similarity and close relationship. The game Atari Football was created in 1973, but it was not released until 1978 because the programmers still could not get the screen to follow the players. They were limited to a single zone. When they finally managed to do it, it was the first game to use this technology. Microsoft tried to monopolize the web browser market when they were just getting started. It was difficult to install other browsers, and Windows generally became slower if you uninstalled Internet Explorer. I think they should have focused on making a better browser. Shipping products by boat is so cheap that the Scots send their cod all the way to China to have it filleted and then shipped back. Anything that seems difficult to you, there are surely thousands of Chinese people willing to do it. 90% of all the scientists who have ever existed are alive today. That means that before there were very few scientists. Eminem once came close to entering the top 20 highest scores in the world in the arcade game Donkey Kong. He is a big fan of classic arcades and managed to record a score high enough to rank among the best, fallen just a few spots short of the historic list. In Norway, an unknown man has been relieving himself in golf course holes for more than 10 years. So now you know, maybe do not play golf in Norway. For the filming of Star Wars: The Last Jedi, a total of 120 large sets and hundreds of costume pieces were built. The movie uses far fewer digital effects than you think. The can opener was invented almost 50 years after cans. Before the utensil existed, people opened them with nails or whatever they could find. The first cans were thick and intended for soldiers, so they even included instructions to open them with a hammer and chisel if necessary. A robot called Bento was deemed too dangerous when it competed on the show Robot Wars, because when it won, pieces of its opponents would go flying and hit the walls of the arena. They had to disqualify it, and as consolation, they gave it the title of co-champion. Babies instinctively hold their breath underwater up to 6 months of age. After that, they forget. This reflex is known as the diving reflex and causes them to automatically close the glottis when they feel water on their face. As the nervous system develops, the reflex diminishes and no longer occurs automatically. According to a survey, 70% of all millionaires do not consider themselves wealthy people. How modest they are. It has been proven that the more features a person's phone has, the more time they will spend in the bathroom, according to a study that was conducted. Cats sleep so much that a 9-year-old cat has been asleep for 3 years. On average, they can sleep between 12 and 16 hours a day, and some even more. This means they spend close to 2/3 of their lives resting, alternating light sleep with periods of deep sleep. Biting the skin around the nails is a condition called dermatophagia, and it has different levels of addiction. It is considered a body-focused repetitive behavior, similar to nail biting, and is often related to anxiety or stress. In severe cases, it can cause wounds and infections if not properly treated. The directors of the movie Avengers: Infinity War, the Russo brothers, paid tribute to their series Arrested Development. In that series, there is a character named Tobias Funke, who paints himself blue because he auditions to be an understudy in the Blue Man Group. In Infinity War, Tobias appears as one of the collector's items and can be seen briefly behind Gamora in a scene. The small pocket inside larger pockets in jeans is not for storing coins. It was made specifically to hold pocket watches. Maybe it is time to update it. A Coca-Cola can without the protective inner lining would corrode and leak in just 3 days. Aluminum reacts with acidic liquids, and carbonated beverages contain phosphoric acid and dissolved carbon dioxide. That is why cans have an internal coating that prevents direct contact and stops corrosion. Before erasers existed, people used breadcrumbs to erase things written in pencil. Soft bread could absorb graphite without damaging the paper too much, making it a practical and inexpensive solution. It was not until the 18th century that natural rubber erasers began to become popular, proving to be much more durable and effective. In every 4 square kilometers of green areas, there are on average 50,000 spiders. Studies on biomass and density estimate that there can be hundreds of millions per square kilometer in certain ecosystems, since many are tiny and live among vegetation. Although the numbers are striking, they play a key role in controlling insect populations. For the sequel to the movie Alien to be approved, James Cameron, the director, wrote the word alien on a board in front of executives and producers, but he added an S, so it said aliens, and then drew a line through the S to turn it into a dollar sign. That day, the movie was approved with a budget of $18 million. At the Bread Museum in Ulm, Germany, there is a collection of 18,000 objects, but none of those objects is bread. It is the Museum der Brotkultur, dedicated to the cultural history of bread. It exhibits paintings, sculptures, utensils, and historical documents that show how this food has influenced society over thousands of years. In general, people tend to read 10% slower on a screen than on paper. Various studies on digital reading have found that lighting, contrast, and continuous scrolling of text can affect speed and comprehension. In China, they had to shut down 2 artificial intelligences because they began criticizing communism and saying good things about the United States. Agriculture was invented or discovered before blue eyes were invented or appeared. The first Homo sapiens with blue eyes had the mutation about 7,700 years ago, while agriculture has been practiced for 11,500 years. In 2013, Sony sent Marcus Persson, the creator of Minecraft, a gold PS1 as an invitation to E3, the most important video game expo. Even though there is still no substance capable of making a person tell the truth, there are some countries, such as Russia and Canada, that use truth serums for interrogations. Who knows what they are made of? Every year, more people die from bee stings than from snake attacks. In many cases, the cause is not the venom itself, but severe allergic reactions, such as anaphylaxis. Although snakes cause more hospitalizations worldwide, deaths from insects can be more frequent in certain countries. At Harvard University, there is a place where they store pigment samples, including some very rare ones that contain pieces of now extinct insects, poisonous metals, and even parts of mummies. In China and other developing countries, video game gold farms are very common. People working 12 hours straight generating in-game currency or its equivalent to exchange it for real money for other players who want to save themselves the time of playing. It is estimated that there are more than 100,000 people working in that in China at least. Global warming helped solve a problem that Bangladesh and India had. They were fighting over an island, but the island disappeared because of rising sea levels. See, global warming is not as bad as we thought, I guess. In movies, they use grocery bags that are different from traditional ones. They're the kind that make less noise, so they do not interfere with sound recording. A tablespoon of matter taken from a neutron star would weigh the same as an entire mountain on planet Earth. These stars form when a massive star collapses after a supernova, compressing its core until protons and electrons merge into neutrons. The resulting density is so extreme that a small portion could weigh billions of tons under Earth conditions. In the 1990 Sega Mega Drive video game Golden Axe, all the recorded voices were done by prisoners sentenced to life imprisonment or the death penalty. In ancient Greece, to declare your love to someone, you had to throw an apple at them. The apple was associated with Aphrodite and the symbolism of desire, so throwing it could be interpreted as a romantic proposal. If the other person caught it, it was understood as an acceptance of the feeling, turning the gesture into a symbolic form of courtship. In Germany, Austria, and the Czech Republic, there is a tradition in which children, on their first day of school, are given a giant cardboard cone filled with candy and toys. I propose that we do that here as well. Roller coaster loops are shaped like an upside-down teardrop. If they were completely circular, they would subject people to more than 6 drams of force, which would cause serious injuries. Almost 37% of all the games purchased on Steam are never played. Various analyses of public libraries have shown that millions of titles have 0 minutes recorded. Massive sales and bundles with dozens of games influence many users to accumulate more titles than they can actually play. If your car's turn signal light starts blinking faster than normal, it may be that the bulb needs to be replaced soon or that one of the bulbs is no longer working. This does not apply to newer cars since they use LED lights. Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, once placed a fake bomb in a locker at his school. He was detained and spent a night in juvenile detention, and there he taught other detainees how to disconnect wires from fans and connect them to the bars of the cells so they would shock the police officers. Quite a character, that Steve. Between 1900 and 1920, tug of war was an Olympic event that awarded medals. It was part of the official program in several editions of the modern Olympic Games and was considered an athletics discipline. Teams of 8 competitors pulled on a rope trying to drag the rival a certain distance, and some countries even won several medals in this unusual event. The voice of Franklin in Grand Theft Auto V, Sean Fantino, in real life is the cousin of young Melee, who is the voice of the main character of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, CJ Johnson. In the comics, Deadpool has taken down more than one enemy with his ability to talk non-stop. He has driven them crazy with it. Ben and Jerry learned how to make ice cream in a correspondence course that cost them $5. They split the cost between them. Now they have one of the largest ice cream brands in the world. The light emitted by 200,000 galaxies makes our universe have a beige or cream color. Scientists call this the cosmic latte. The guitarist of Arctic Monkeys, Jamie Cook, worked installing bathrooms even when the band began to have great success. Once he returned from a completely sold-out concert to finish a job in a bathroom. If you press the letter S while watching Netflix, you can skip the introduction of series without having to click with the mouse where it says Skip Intro. Very useful for wild Netflix marathons. The part where flamingos' legs bend is not their knees, it is their ankles. The knee is higher up, hidden among the feathers near the body. What looks like a backward knee is actually the ankle joint, very elongated and visible in these wading birds. More than 1/3 of the people who smoke in the world are from China. In that country, tobacco consumption has historically been high, especially among adult men. Although in recent years, restrictions and public health campaigns have been implemented, the total number of smokers remains one of the largest in the world. The scientific name of the western lowland gorilla is gorilla, gorilla, gorilla. In biological classification, the genus is gorilla, the species is gorilla, gorilla, and the western lowland subspecies repeats the name, following the rules of zoological nomenclature. This type of repetition is known as a trinomial name and is not very common, which makes it especially curious. Tarantulas can survive up to 2 years without food. Their metabolism is very slow, and they can reduce their activity even more when food is scarce. They also store energy in their abdomen, which allows them to endure long periods without hunting, especially in dry or extreme environments. Scientists found evidence that in Pompeii, the city that was completely destroyed by the eruption of a volcano, there were takeout restaurants similar to what exists today. Most of the bread sold in the United States as whole wheat bread is actually just white bread dyed brown. In the food rations of soldiers during the Second World War, the famous Tootsie Rolls candies were included. They did it because those candies stay the same regardless of harsh weather conditions. Nintendo was founded in 1889, and in its beginnings, it was a playing card company. There are many companies in Japan that are more than 120 years old. The minions only have 3 fingers, in case you had not noticed. These animated characters from the Despicable Me franchise were designed with simple shapes and exaggerated features to make them more expressive and easier to animate. Their 3 fingers help maintain that cartoonish and distinctive style that made them so recognizable in film. A California Highway Patrol officer named Kevin Briggs has stopped more than 200 people from jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. For years, he patrolled that area and became known for speaking with people in crisis, persuading them with patience and empathy not to jump. Sometimes, ants that misinterpret the scent trails left by other ants leave the lines and begin walking in circles, and it can happen that others follow them and form a perpetual circle until they faint. In the state of Texas in the United States, it is illegal to kill Bigfoot if someone ever finds him. In India, there is a family consisting of one man, his 39 wives, and his 94 children. The case became known for belonging to a religious community that practiced polygamy and for all living under the same roof. They do not have television in their house. The mitochondrion in our cells that generates energy is a very ancient bacterium related to other unicellular organisms from more than 1 million years ago. Full-body scanners at airports get confused when you wear very shiny clothing with sequins and reflective items. If you wear that type of clothing, you will most likely be checked manually. Approximately between 40 and 50% of the genetic information in our intestines does not correspond to any known classification: animal, plant, fungus, virus, or bacteria. It has not yet been discovered what it is. Biologists call it biological dark matter. In Kenya, it is popular to run naked at night. All services in Las Vegas, from government offices to public lighting, use exclusively renewable energy. The last movie rented at a Blockbuster before it officially closed its doors in 2013 was ironically called This Is the End. In 2009, Nigerian police arrested a goat because they claimed it was suspected of armed robbery. The case went viral when some witnesses said a thief had transformed into the animal to escape. Although it only reached worldwide fame in recent months, the game Fortnite was first announced in 2011, but due to delays and testing time, it was not released until mid-2017. And even though it is now free, many people bought it in pre-order since it was announced as a paid game. The cartoon The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy won 2 Emmy Awards in 2006 and 2007, respectively. The inventor of the waffle iron did not like waffles. Coca-Cola still uses coca leaves to make its concentrate, and there is only one factory in the United States that has the necessary Drug Enforcement Administration license to remove the cocaine from the leaves. Writer Joe Hill was so determined that no one would know he is Stephen King's son that his own agent did not find out until after 10 years of working with him. Before video games were blamed for the violent actions of some children, it was the board game Dungeons & Dragons that was blamed in the 1980s. The company Foxconn that manufactures the iPhone has managed to reduce its employees from 100,000 to only 50,000, thanks to the robots it has introduced. Snail teeth are the strongest natural material that exists. They can withstand pressures high enough to turn coal into diamonds. That is right, snails have many tiny teeth. 20 years before launching the PlayStation VR virtual reality headset, Sony released the Glasstron, a head-mounted display, and it did not have 3D and cost $800. In the Netherlands, the first completely plastic-free supermarket section was recently opened, hoping that more and more stores will join that initiative. Sahara means desert in Arabic, so the Sahara Desert is desert. It is an example of a geographic tautology, like when people say Mississippi River, since Mississippi also means river in an indigenous language. Milunka Savic enlisted in the Serbian army by pretending to be a man. She fought in World War I and was wounded on at least 9 occasions. However, she captured a total of 23 Bulgarian soldiers all by herself. StarCraft was the first video game played in space. Astronaut Daniel T. Barry took a copy during mission STS-96 in 1999 and played it aboard the shuttle. He even received a symbolic certificate from the developer as proof that the game had officially left Earth. In Japan, Ronald McDonald is called Donald McDonald because in Japanese, there is no letter R sound. The first microprocessor was not made by Intel. It was made secretly by the United States government, specifically to control the first F-14 aircraft. In Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, there is a boss who can be defeated if you do not turn on the game for a week, something that can also be done by advancing the date on your console. A rock with a fake cave painting of a man pushing a shopping cart was hung on a wall of the British Museum by street artist Banksy in 2005. Days passed before anyone realized that the piece did not belong there. Rita, one of Bob Marley's wives, was saved by her dreadlocks when someone tried to assassinate her with a gunshot. William Shakespeare, in addition to inventing words and even names, also popularized the phrase, "break the ice." The Xbox was going to be called Direct Xbox because of the use of DirectX in the console, but later they decided to remove the Direct, doing the brand a big favor. The Central Intelligence Agency of the United States, the CIA, reads more than 5 million tweets per day. Bubbles keep bathwater warm for a longer time when you bathe. They act as a kind of insulator. The layer of foam traps air and reduces heat loss by evaporation at the surface. By decreasing that exchange with the environment, the water keeps its temperature longer. The only video games in the Smithsonian Institution Museum are Pong, Pac-Man, and Dragon's Lair. Acetaminophen is extremely toxic to cats because they do not have the proper enzyme to break it down. They can suffocate even if they consume a very small amount. No bat can walk because the bones in their legs are so thin that they could break. According to a law in China, all children over 11 years old must plant at least one tree each year. This was enacted because of the country's severe deforestation. Hearthstone, Crossy Road, Cuphead, and Assassin's Creed are just a few of all the games that have been created with the Unity game engine. This engine is popular for its ease of developing on multiple platforms, from mobile devices to consoles, and for allowing both independent projects and large-scale productions. In 2011, a woman bought an invisible piece of art for $10,000. It seems like this postmodern art thing is getting out of control. If you leave a goldfish in a dark room for a long time, it can turn white. And I suppose that is not something healthy for the fish. The lack of light affects the production and distribution of pigments in its skin, which can cause it to gradually lose color. Although the change can be reversible, proper lighting is important for its well-being. The first president of Zimbabwe, President Banana, Canaan Sodindo Banana, enacted a law that prohibited people from making fun of his name. Link, the main character of The Legend of Zelda, was left-handed in all the games until, in the Wii version, they had to make him right-handed so that it would fit most people using the console's motion controls. Coins that have some manufacturing defect are usually worth much more than their face value. If it is a significant defect, they can be worth much more to collectors. Once, a solar eclipse stopped a war. In the year 585, in what is now Turkey, both sides stopped fighting when everything went dark because they took it as a divine sign. The logo of the New Zealand Air Force is a kiwi, a bird that does not fly. The Royal New Zealand Air Force adopted this bird as a national emblem, since the kiwi is a symbol of the country's identity. Although it may seem ironic for an Air Force, it represents pride and belonging in New Zealand. Exercising regularly can delay brain aging by up to 10 years. Various studies have found that physical activity improves blood flow to the brain, stimulates the formation of new neural connections, and benefits memory. Active people tend to show greater volume in areas related to learning, which is associated with slower cognitive decline over time. There is a special version of the PlayStation called Net Yaroze that allowed people to create their own games for the console using a home computer. Redheads produce more vitamin D than people with other hair colors. That means they do not have to sunbathe as much to have more of that vitamin. A woman in Australia divorced her husband after he asked her to get rid of her pet crocodile. She had been caring for the crocodile since 1996 and loved it so much that she let it sleep next to her son in the same bed. The giant tortoise of the Galapagos Islands did not receive a scientific name for 300 years because it could not be properly classified in Europe since the clever sailors on ships would eat them. Apparently, they tasted very good, and even Charles Darwin tried them at some point. The three-dimensional N in the Nintendo 64 logo is made with exactly 64 vertices and has 64 faces. Nachos are called nachos because they were invented by a man named Nacho Anaya in Piedras Negras, Mexico. The dish was called Nachos Special, but later it was shortened to just nachos. Legend says he made them with the ingredients he found at that moment in his kitchen for the wives of some soldiers in that city. Praying mantises have only one ear, and it is located between their legs. This auditory organ is found on the lower part of the thorax and is especially sensitive to ultrasound. It helps them detect bats in flight and react in time to try to escape from their predators. In Stalingrad, during World War II, the life expectancy of a Soviet soldier was only 24 hours. In 2003, a German hacker stole the code for the game Half-Life 2 while it was in development. Gabe Newell from Valve Corporation tricked him by offering him a job as a cybersecurity inspector, or something like that. They gave him tickets to travel to the United States to arrest him when he arrived, but the German government found out about it and arrested him there in Germany first. The name of the actor, Shia LaBeouf, literally means, "Thank God for the beef." In 1997, a woman left actor Charles Bronson all her money in a handwritten will. It was approximately $300,000. They never met. She was simply a fan. Chocolate chip cookies were invented in 1938. They were created by Ruth Wakefield at the Toll House Inn in Massachusetts when she added pieces of chocolate to the dough, expecting them to melt completely. Instead, they kept their shape, giving rise to one of the most popular recipes in modern baking. North Korea used parts of the game Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 to create a propaganda video against the United States. The part they used was an attack on New York that is part of the game's story. If you search for the word askew on Google, which means crooked, the entire page will tilt slightly. Vincent van Gogh's painting, The Starry Night, is the view he had from the St. Paul de Moselle Asylum. He painted it in 1889 while he was institutionalized, and although he was inspired by the real landscape from his window, he added imaginary elements and an expressive style that did not exactly match the literal view. It is possible to ask Google to pixelate or blur your house on Google Earth or Street View. It was discovered that some pandas pretend to be pregnant in order to receive more food and special treatment from humans while in captivity. Microsoft Excel 97 from Microsoft Office had a playable version of a flight simulator hidden in its code. It was a so-called Easter egg that could be accessed through a specific combination of steps within the program. In it, there was a three-dimensional environment where the user could fly over a simple landscape with the names of the development team. In South Korea, 68-hour work weeks have just been banned for being considered inhumane. Now the maximum they can make a person work is 52 hours. Koreans are among the people who work the most hours in the world. The creators of the movie Despicable Me admitted that they only created the minions to make people like Gru, the supervillain protagonist of the film, more. A lawyer named Mark Thompson sent a letter to Bill Gates saying that Microsoft could legally be responsible for the Virginia Tech incident because of Counter-Strike, a game that has nothing to do with Microsoft. In the city of Dorset in Minnesota, United States, a 3-year-old child was elected mayor. Canned party streamers that people use when celebrating something are used by the military around the world to reveal invisible tripwires used to detonate explosives. The streamers catch on the wires, but they are not heavy enough to trigger them. When Electronic Arts was convinced to make a soccer video game, they took it as a joke at first. They did not think it would sell much compared to Madden NFL. Now, FIFA is the company's most important title and sells much more than the American football game, Madden. A farmer in England could not bring himself to kill the cows he had when it was necessary to do so, so he converted his farm to 100% vegan. The deepest mailbox in the world is in Japan. In Susami Bay, it is 10 meters underwater. It was installed as a tourist attraction and allows people to send waterproof postcards that are later collected by divers and taken to the traditional postal system. In Grand Theft Auto 5, you can find an alien in a frozen river in the first mission. You just have to go to the right instead of heading toward the train tracks while you are escaping. Napoleon Bonaparte and Benjamin Franklin were at some point defeated by a chess-playing robot that traveled around the world, challenging and beating beginners and chess masters. In reality, that robot was just a man in disguise. What is funny is that now a real robot could easily beat that robot man. In 2014, the police in Paris found in the catacombs, which are a system of underground tunnels beneath the city, a movie theater set up by professionals with a bar and many classic and new films. When the police returned to the place 3 days later, there was a note that said, "Do not try to find us." Although Batman's fame began when his first comic was released in 1940, his first appearance was in Detective Comics number 27 in 1939. Mortal Kombat 2 was so popular when it came out in arcades that they had to release machines with a locking system to prevent thieves from ripping out the motherboard and taking it home to play. At that time, arcade boards were highly coveted, and its success generated long lines and record profits in arcades. Bananas are slightly curved because they grow trying to point toward the sun. This phenomenon is called negative geotropism, or phototropism, and it occurs when the fruit, which initially hangs downward, begins to curve upward, seeking light as it develops. As it ripens, that response to the light stimulus gives it its characteristic shape. Pearls can easily dissolve if they are placed in acetic acid, also known as vinegar. This happens because they are mainly made of calcium carbonate, which reacts with acids and breaks down, releasing carbon dioxide. That is why acidic substances can damage them and dull their natural shine. If you are one of those who feels cheated because potato chip bags contain more air than chips, that air is actually nitrogen, and it helps keep the chips from oxidizing as quickly. In addition, the bag is inflated so they do not get crushed. The first Halo game was originally going to be exclusive to Apple operating systems, but Microsoft bought Bungie, the company that develops the game, turning it into the most famous title on the first Xbox and the most important game series for Microsoft. The original Deadpool suit for the first movie had an extra layer of fake muscles that had to be removed, and this was because Ryan Reynolds was too muscular and it looked strange. It was also too tight. Ryan Reynolds problems. The national sport of Turkey is oil wrestling. Known as Yağlı Güreş, it consists of competitors covering their bodies with olive oil before facing each other, which makes it more difficult to grip the opponent. This traditional sport has centuries of history and is celebrated at annual festivals such as Kirkbinat. The backpack carried by the so-called Backpack Kid, who became famous doing the floss dance alongside Katy Perry and other artists, is not empty. In that backpack, he always carries a water bottle, spinners, a charger, and headphones. It is said that it helps him maintain stability while performing the difficult dance. All the animation in the game Cuphead is done by hand, drawn with pencil on paper to achieve that retro cartoon look. Its creators were inspired by animated shorts from the 1930s, and then digitized thousands of individual drawings, painting, and animating them frame by frame to preserve that classic style. There is a robot factory in Japan that is so automated that it can operate without supervision for periods of 30 days. The robots build up to 50 robots each day, and who knows what they are planning while no one is supervising them. In 2014, a pregnant woman in India swam almost 1 kilometer in a river to reach the hospital to give birth. Microsoft gave a computer and tools to a man in Ghana who taught computer science on a chalkboard. In Russia, there is a village called Paris in Chelyabinsk Oblast, where in 2005 they built a replica of the Eiffel Tower, but several times smaller. The structure also functions as a telecommunications tower and has become a curious local attraction. Originally, the humans in the movie Wall-E were going to be shapeless masses, and only at the very end of the movie would it be revealed that they were actually humans, after the effects of zero gravity and the passage of years. But they decided to stick with the robust shape we came to know. The game The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild was first made as an 8-bit style game as a prototype in order to test whether the new features that would be added actually worked. Japanese people wear face masks not only to avoid catching or spreading illnesses, they also do it for fashion and to avoid conversations with other people. When we appear with red eyes in a photograph, it is because the pupil is just a hole and the flash reflects the blood at the back of the eyes. The light enters all the way to the retina, which is full of blood vessels, and bounces back toward the camera. That is why the effect is more common in dark environments, when the pupil is dilated. Activision and Bungie have stated that there is a 10-year plan for the Destiny franchise, which includes 4 full titles with expansions and downloadable content. In total, it is going to cost $500 million. 75% of a banana is water. That is not much compared to a radish, which is 95% H2O. Some prisoners in Greenland prisons possess the keys to their own cells. They can go out for walks during the day to go to work and are even allowed to go hunting animals with a rifle. Of every 5 species that exist in the world, one is a bat. That means that out of 5,488 species, 1,240 are bats. Basically, we are surrounded by beetles and bats. The famous life simulator, The Sims, was originally going to be an architecture game. The initial idea of its creator, Will Wright, was that the characters would only evaluate whether the houses were well designed. Over time, the project evolved to focus on the daily lives and relationships of the Sims themselves. Bill Gates' mansion was designed on an Apple computer. Actor Ben Affleck is banned from playing blackjack at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, Las Vegas, because one day he was caught using the classic trick of counting cards. 3 dogs were saved during the sinking of the Titanic. Their owners were traveling with them in first-class cabins. In 2010, a couple bought the town of Wakanda in Washington, United States, for only $360,000. It came with a cafe, a post office, a gas station, a 4-bedroom house, and even its own zip code. A bargain. In Japan, a train station remained open solely to take a girl to school. The train stopped there only twice a day to take her and to bring her back. When hippos get angry, their sweat turns red. This is what all the water on the planet would look like if you gathered it together into a floating sphere and placed it over the United States. Although it seems enormous, it would actually be a sphere a little more than 808 miles in diameter. It includes oceans, rivers, lakes, glaciers, and groundwater. The comparison shows how thin the layer of water is that makes life on Earth possible. In 1979, a cryogenics company that promised to preserve people's brains for all eternity to revive them in the future went bankrupt, and everything they had to be thawed. Manufacturing and distributing phone books consumes more than 600,000 tons of paper per year, even though almost no one uses them anymore. According to scientific studies, the brains of people who speak 2 or more languages are better at ignoring distractions and are generally more efficient. The lion growling sounds used in the movie The Lion King are actually not lions. It was the actor Frank Welker screaming and growling into a metal trash can. Samsung means 3 stars in Korean. The founder chose the name because he wanted the company to sound powerful and enduring like the stars. Every minute we can think anywhere from 300 to 1,000 words while talking to ourselves inside our minds. This phenomenon is known as inner dialogue and varies depending on the person and the situation. Although it does not always take the form of clear words, the brain can process information very quickly while we reflect or plan. There is a butterfly called 8998. It is called that because the markings on its wings are very similar to those numbers. It is native to Colombia. The smell of flowers is becoming weaker. This is due to rising temperatures. Heat accelerates the evaporation of aromatic compounds and also alters the production of essential oils in plants. In addition, air pollution can break down the molecules responsible for scent, reducing the distance at which pollinators can perceive them. To find out in case they are copied, dictionary writers include fake words, and no one does anything about it. Maybe they invented many words that are used today. The restaurant Sobrino de Botín in Madrid is the oldest restaurant in the world. It has existed since 1725. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson set a new Guinness World Record for the most selfies taken in 3 minutes. He took 105 selfies with his fans during the premiere of the movie Rampage. Almost 85% of the planet's oxygen is produced in the oceans by phytoplankton, which are small autotrophic organisms that live dispersed in the water and probably spend their time planning how to steal secret burger formulas. Gold is edible, but if you see gold, please do not eat it. Pure gold is chemically inert and is used in very thin sheets called gold leaf to decorate desserts and drinks. Even so, it does not provide nutrients and must be certified as safe for consumption, since not all gold is safe. In the movie Rocky from 1976 and in the movie Rocky Balboa from 2006, Rocky's pet turtles are portrayed by the same turtles in real life. It has been shown that people who play video games have a greater ability to refocus on what they were doing after a distraction than people who do not play. Garlic can slow down aging due to the large amount of antioxidants it contains. It contains compounds such as allicin and other sulfur derivatives that help fight oxidative stress in the body. In addition, it has been studied for its possible cardiovascular benefits and its positive effect on the immune system. In many countries, the Navy is once again teaching celestial navigation, meaning navigating by the stars, to know where they are sailing. They're doing this in order to respond to potential cyber attacks on navigation systems, proof that, little by little, we are going back to the Middle Ages. The 6 official languages of the United Nations are English, French, Arabic, Chinese, Russian, and Spanish. These languages are used for official documents and simultaneous translation in meetings. They were established to represent different regions of the world and facilitate international diplomatic communication. The soda Fanta began as a substitute for Coca-Cola when Germany could not import it from the United States. During World War II, the German branch of Coca-Cola was isolated by trade restrictions, so it developed a new drink with locally available ingredients. That is how Fanta was born, whose name comes from the word fantasy, referring to the creativity needed to improvise the formula. Radio took 38 years to reach an audience of 50 million users, while the iPod took only 3 years to reach that number. Spiked dog collars have existed for a long time. In ancient Greece, they were used on shepherd dogs to protect their necks from attacks by wild wolves at night. Lightning has not brought down an airplane since 1963. This is because airplanes are now built in such a way that electricity does not collide with the aircraft. It simply travels along it and then continues on its way. Humans from a long time ago took advantage of our endurance for running long distances without getting tired to catch their prey. No animal can beat us at that. In China, there are 97 million people with the last name Li, more than the total population of many countries. The surname is often written as Li or Liu, depending on the romanization, and it is one of the oldest and most common in the country, with millions of people who share it. Grunting in a tennis match is punished with a point against the player. This is because the grunting of some players, such as that of Maria Sharapova, is equivalent in noise to the roar of a lion, and this can affect the opponent. In 2013, Disney tried to trademark the phrase Day of the Dead when they began planning the movie Coco. Obviously, they could not register the phrase. Scotland was one of the few countries that could not be conquered by the Roman Empire during the 1st century. The Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein published a romance novel that became one of the best-selling books in his country, and in addition to the novel, a television series of 22 episodes was adapted from it. Until 1948, the soft drink 7-Up contained lithium citrate, which was used as a stabilizer to treat bipolar disorder. Donnie Yen, the actor who appears as a monk in Star Wars Rogue One, was once leaving a nightclub in Hong Kong with his girlfriend when he was attacked by a gang that had been harassing him earlier. 8 members of the gang had to be hospitalized after the altercation, and Donnie did not have a single scratch. On October 24, 1975, 90% of all women in Iceland went on strike demanding equal rights. They did not work, did not take care of their children, and did not do housework for a day. Human hair is so difficult to break that its strength is compared to that of steel. The key is to gather many hairs together. That way, the strength accumulates. A single hair can support around 3.5 ounces before breaking, and a bundle of thousands could withstand several pounds of weight. This resistance is due to keratin, a fibrous protein that gives it structure and elasticity. No one really knew who had created this design that was very popular on disposable cups for a long time, and recently became an internet meme until a Reddit investigation was conducted. It was created by Gina Ekus in 1989, all as part of a design contest. Many people who are allergic to latex are also allergic to bananas. This is due to a phenomenon known as cross-reactivity, since some proteins in natural latex are similar to those found in fruits such as bananas, avocados, or kiwi. The immune system can confuse them and react in a similar way to both. In Russia, there are around 9 million more women than men. This difference is partly due to higher female life expectancy and historical factors such as wars and health conditions. The gap is more noticeable at older ages, where the male population declines more rapidly. When Stranger Things came out, the stock of the company Kellogg's reached its peak thanks to the scenes in which Eleven appears eating and stealing Eggos, that company's frozen waffles. A man named Jack Reynolds became the oldest person to get a tattoo at 104 years of age. When he turned 105, he became the oldest person to ride a roller coaster, and he is going for more records. Facebook is blue mainly because the creator of the social network, Mark Zuckerberg, cannot see the colors red and green. Taking risks is contagious. Studies indicate that you are more likely to take a risk if you see someone else do it before you, even if you are not sure of the consequences. It is possible to levitate objects using only sound waves. This phenomenon is called acoustic levitation and occurs when high-frequency sound waves create pressure points that hold small particles in the air. Liquid droplets and even tiny insects have been suspended in laboratory experiments. Actor Vincent D'Onofrio holds the record for the most weight gained to portray a role. He gained 70 pounds to play Private Pyle in the movie Full Metal Jacket. There are at least 18 muscles in dogs' ears, which is why they can move them so easily. This mobility improves their hearing ability and helps them detect the direction and distance of distant sounds. The Amish are among the fastest-growing populations. On average, they have 7 children per family. This high birth rate, along with low levels of leaving the community, has caused their population to double approximately every 20 years, especially in states such as Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. The largest jellyfish ever discovered measured 23 miles, longer than a blue whale, the largest animal in the world. George Washington, the one on the $1 bill, spent $200 on ice cream during the summer of 1790. That money equals more than $5,000 today. At that time, ice cream was a luxury reserved for the elite, since it required stored ice and special techniques for its preparation. Owners of personalized license plates in Uganda had their taxes increased to almost triple. They will have to pay $5,992 instead of $1,498. There is a village in India called Piplantry, where they celebrate when a girl is born by planting 111 trees. I think we should adopt that tradition in every country. The person who holds the Guinness World Record for filing the most lawsuits in his lifetime also tried to sue the Guinness World Records Company. The most cited case is that of Jonathan Lee Riches, an American inmate who filed thousands of lawsuits against celebrities, companies, and even historical figures. Although not all of them succeeded, his legal activity became so extreme that it ended up becoming part of his own fame. When the model Cara Delevingne was given the role of Enchantress, the villain in the movie Suicide Squad, she prepared by running naked in the forest and howling at the moon like a wolf, things that apparently did not work very well for her. The average computer user blinks only 7 times per minute. The normal rate is 20 times. That is why it is recommended to rest your eyes when you are on the computer. By reducing blinking, the surface of the eye dries out more easily, which can cause irritation and eye strain. A common recommendation is to apply the 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, look at something about 20 yards away for 20 seconds. Most toilets in Hong Kong use seawater. They do this to save fresh water, since it is a limited resource in the region. Since the 1960s, they implemented a separate piping system to flush with salt water, significantly reducing the consumption of drinking water. If you trigger an explosion inside a bubble underwater using a sound wave, it can emit flashes of light, and that phenomenon has still not been explained. If we wore glasses that flipped everything upside down, our brain would eventually notice the anomaly and flip our entire vision so we could continue seeing normally. In Italy, a new courthouse was built solely to prosecute the mafia. 472 members were sentenced in a trial that lasted from 1986 to 1992. It is the record for the largest trial of all time. The Alaska Malamute became the official dog of Alaska after a campaign and legislative process that started because a 3-year-old boy asked why Alaska did not have an official dog. This bird, called the kakapo, is one of the most endangered species because it cannot fly and also gives off a distinctive, musky, relatively pleasant smell, which makes it the perfect victim for predators. When Czechoslovakia separated, it was not only the country that split. The national anthem split as well. It contained verses in Slovak and verses in Czech, and each side kept its part. The battery of the famous Nokia 3310 lasted so long that you could make a 55-hour call without it shutting off. In reality, the long battery life was not because it had a super battery, but because the phone consumed almost no energy. In 1979, a piece of NASA's Skylab space station fell on the small town of Esperance in Australia. When this happened, the town proceeded to fine NASA $400 for littering in a public place. The most powerful roller coaster in the world is located in Johannesburg, South Africa. It is called the Tower of Terror, and riders can experience accelerations of up to 6.3 G, which may not be enough to untie your shoes, but I would not get on it even if they gave me $10,000. The common swift can remain flying without touching land for up to 10 months. They sleep, relieve themselves, and even mate while flying. Do not ask how they do it. On Christmas in 1927 in the United States, they left all the runway lights in the country on so that Santa Claus could travel more easily and not crash. Searching for something on Google requires more processing power than what was needed to send Neil Armstrong and 11 other astronauts on different missions to the moon. The computers in the Apollo program had very limited capacity compared to modern data centers, which perform millions of operations in fractions of a second to process each query. Before being chosen by Netflix, the series Stranger Things was rejected by 15 television companies. The creators, the Duffer Brothers, pitched the project for months without success because many executives doubted a story led by children with a dark tone. Finally, Netflix took a chance on the idea, and it ended up becoming one of its biggest global hits. People who have seen planet Earth from space experience an increase in empathy toward the entire human race and a desire for world peace. In Panama City, there was an armed conflict in 1856 because of a drunken American who did not want to pay 5 cents for a slice of watermelon. The conflict ended with 15 American casualties and 2 Panamanian ones, and it is now known as the Watermelon War. In a coal mine in Germany, wooden spears more than 400,000 years old were found. They are the oldest wooden artifacts that have been discovered. To prevent accidents in which cyclists or motorcyclists crash into an open car door as the driver is getting out, it is recommended to use the opposite hand to open the door, forcing you to turn your body and check if someone is coming before opening it. In the Middle Ages, books were so valuable that they were chained to bookshelves. It was a very common practice that lasted until the 18th century, when they became more affordable. The stickers that are attached to some fruits must by law be edible, but if you are going to eat them, it is recommended to wash them first. And if you are washing them, you might as well remove them. The United States Army played recordings of distorted human voices at night as a form of psychological attack during the Vietnam War. Bats can eat up to 1,200 mosquitoes in an hour, and there are species that eat their entire body weight in insects every night. The Baroque painter Johannes Gump only painted one self-portrait, but in that self-portrait, he portrayed himself, portraying himself, while looking at himself in a mirror. Self-portraitception. Approximately 20% of technology company founders are immigrants, even though immigrants make up only 4% of the total population. In Papua New Guinea, 832 languages are spoken. It is the country with the most linguistic diversity in the world. This enormous variety is due to its mountainous geography and isolated communities that developed their own languages over centuries, many with only a few thousand speakers. Disney theme park employees point with 2 fingers when they want to indicate a direction. They do it because pointing with 1 finger is considered disrespectful in some cultures. Also, because Walt Disney did that since he always held a cigarette between his fingers. Polar bear fur is not actually white. It is transparent, and the hairs are hollow to help protect them from the cold. In addition, their skin is dark, but in hot and humid climates, it can happen that their fur turns green due to mold and algae that can grow inside the hairs. There is a group of people working to create trees that glow in the dark. They want to achieve this by combining genes from jellyfish and bioluminescent fungi with plants. Their goal is to create trees that someday replace street lighting. Bears have a better sense of smell than dogs. In fact, some species can detect scents from several miles away and locate food buried under soil or snow. Their brain devotes an enormous proportion to processing smells, making them some of the terrestrial mammals with the greatest olfactory ability on the planet. Michael Jackson wanted to make a musical of Harry Potter, but the writer J.K. Rowling did not want to grant the rights. According to what has been told, the project would have included original songs and a spectacular stage production. Rowling preferred to keep the story focused on the official literary and cinematic format. This is a photo of the last thylacine, or Tasmanian tiger, in captivity, and the last of its species. It was taken at a zoo in Tasmania in 1933. The first banks that existed were religious temples, where people stored seeds or precious metals that were used at that time as currency. Okunoshima, Japan, is known as Rabbit Island. There are thousands of rabbits that reproduced from 5 that were brought there in the 1960s. They have no natural predators, and people feed them, so they live very well and are practically the owners of the place. Mexican race car driver Pedro Rodriguez always traveled with a Mexican flag and a recording of the national anthem, because when he won the South African Grand Prix in 1969, the organizers did not have the national anthem. Instead, they played the Mexican hat dance. Coffee does not actually dehydrate you. It can hydrate you almost as much as water. Although it contains caffeine, which has a mild diuretic effect, in people who consume it regularly, the body adapts and that effect is minimal. Since it is mostly made up of water, it contributes to daily fluid intake, as long as it is consumed in moderation. There are more than 1.6 million automated teller machines worldwide. There is even one in Antarctica. That machine was installed to serve researchers and visitors at a scientific base, although it does not operate all year. Most of these devices are concentrated in Asia and North America. Cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev went into space as a citizen of the Soviet Union and returned as a Russian citizen. This happened because he was still in orbit when the Soviet Union dissolved on December 26, 1991. The Netherlands found out it was at war with an archipelago off the coast of England called the Isles of Scilly. The war had already lasted 335 years and had been forgotten, so a peace agreement was signed in 1986. Chocolate can help prevent teeth from wearing down. Parts of the cocoa seed can attack the bacteria that break down teeth. Some studies have found that compounds present in cacao, such as certain polyphenols, can inhibit the growth of bacteria related to cavities. However, this mainly applies to pure cacao, since the added sugar in many commercial chocolates can have the opposite effect. Eminem's mother sued him for $11 million over lyrics in which he speaks badly about her. In the end, she only won $25,000, and most of that money went to her lawyer. Life has existed on planet Earth for more than 80% of its existence. It has been present practically since the moment it stopped being molten rock and cooled down. The earliest signs of life are very simple microorganisms that appeared billions of years ago in the primitive oceans. From those tiny and resilient forms, all the ecosystems we know today slowly evolved. In 1913, Hitler, Stalin, Trotsky, and Freud lived in an area of less than 1 square mile in Vienna, Austria. They were neighbors. The woman who rented the garage to Larry Page and Sergey Brin, where they created Google in 1998, was Susan Wojcicki, or however you pronounce that, sorry Susan, who is currently the chief executive officer of YouTube. The first mobile phones released in 1983, the ones that look like a giant brick, cost $4,000. An example is the Motorola Dynatac 8000X by Motorola, which offered only 30 minutes of talk time and took around 10 hours to recharge. Even so, it became a symbol of status and futuristic technology in its time. The Sanskrit word used for war literally means desiring more cows than the ones you already have. In ancient India, cattle were a symbol of wealth, power, and sustenance, so many conflicts arose from disputes related to herds. In fact, in Vedic texts, prosperity is associated with the number of cows owned, reflecting a deeply livestock-based economy. Lifetime warranties are actually for the lifetime of the product, not for the lifetime of the person who buys it. In many cases, the manufacturer defines that lifetime as the estimated period of reasonable use according to materials and wear. That is why some coverage ends when the model stops being manufactured or when parts are no longer available. In 2017, nearly 25,000 Kinder eggs were confiscated at United States Customs. Those chocolates with toys inside are banned in the country. Pixar sued Nintendo because the video game Uniracers had a unicycle as its protagonist, just like a short film from the animated movie company. The video game was canceled. Most of Disney's lead animators preferred to work on Pocahontas rather than The Lion King, because the studio had low expectations for the movie. It was the first film for almost all of the animators who worked on it. Goldfish cannot close their eyes because they do not have eyelids. In fact, most fish lack movable eyelids, so they sleep with their eyes open and rest by reducing their activity. Their eyes are adapted to water and always remain moist, so they do not need to blink like humans do. Retired basketball player and actor Shaquille O'Neal owns 150 car washes. World of Warcraft has generated more than $10 billion since its launch in 2004, becoming one of the most successful video games of all time, although it is no longer the one that has generated the most money in history. When Benjamin Franklin invented his own harmonica, it became so popular in Europe that Mozart and Beethoven used it to compose music. The so-called glass harmonica, created by Benjamin Franklin in the 18th century, produced ethereal sounds by spinning wet glass bowls. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Ludwig van Beethoven were fascinated by its delicate tone, although over time, the instrument fell out of use due to its fragility and difficulty transporting it. The London Underground, with its 270 stations, runs more above ground than below it. Although it is famous for its tunnels, a large part of its lines travel along elevated or open-air sections, especially in the outer areas, since digging them was more expensive in the 19th century. In the mid-1960s, the sleepover Barbie doll came with a book called How to Lose Weight. One of the tips included in that little book was, do not eat. A very bad piece of advice for people who are not made of plastic. In the Japanese version of Final Fantasy, you can find a grave that says it belongs to Link. It is a nod to the protagonist of The Legend of Zelda, a small inside joke among developers of the time. These crossovers were common in the 1980s as a sign of respect between studios. Once, Nigerian scammers sold a fake airport to an international bank for $242 million. It was not until 3 years later that it was discovered that everything was fake. Once, Stephen Hawking was invited to the Vatican, where he had an audience with the Pope. Since Pope John Paul did not understand him very well, he knelt next to the wheelchair, to which the physicist exclaimed, "Things really have changed since Galileo." The recipe for French bread has existed and been prepared since before France existed. Crusty bread with an airy crumb has roots in ancient fermentation techniques developed by Romans and other European peoples. Over time, in French territory, kneading and baking methods were refined, giving rise to the modern baguette that is now associated with that country. 55% of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds players also play Counter-Strike Global Offensive, or CSGO. It is basically the same addiction. The popular K-pop group BTS was created by the entertainment company Big Hit. Auditions to find the members began in 2010, but it was not until 2013 that the final lineup was defined. In February 2009, a French submarine and a British one carrying nuclear missiles collided with each other because they could not detect one another on their respective radars. Fortunately, nothing exploded and no one was injured. The names Olivia, Miranda, and Jessica were invented by William Shakespeare. They appeared for the first time in his works. Like if your name is one of those. The logo and all the Xbox branding are green because Horace Luke, the designer, only had a green marker available since all the others had been stolen. No one wanted that color. Harley Quinn did not originate in the comics. Her first appearance was in the animated Batman series, and she was so popular that she was added to the comic book universe shortly afterward. The city of Brightwater in New Zealand had 5 lights in 1911 that drew power from a hydroelectric generator controlled by chickens. Yes, by chickens. When night fell, the chickens entered their coop to sleep, and their weight activated an electrical circuit that turned on the lights. It would seem that some cities still use that system. Mexico sent 300,000 workers to farms and factories in the United States to help while the army was fighting alongside the Allies in World War II. Greasy pizza boxes are impossible to recycle. The paper fibers cannot be separated from the oil during that process. While filming Malcolm in the Middle, Bryan Cranston, who played Hal, invited Eric Purr Sullivan, who played Dewey, to spend weekends with his family so he could experience a more normal childhood. Many parts of Mount Everest have high-speed internet so that people can upload their selfies. At base camps, antennas and mobile networks have been installed that allow sending photos, making video calls, and even live streaming. Connectivity facilitates expedition logistics and improves communication in case of emergency. In the 70s, the United States government tried to create an artificial coral reef using pieces of concrete and used tires. The reef ended up being a major ecological disaster because the tires eroded and were thrown by hurricanes onto natural reefs. In England, there used to be a window tax because people refused to say how much they earned, considering it an invasion of privacy. So the government charged based on how many windows homes had. That is why you can now find many houses with their windows completely bricked up. The Russians abandoned and set fire to the city of Moscow when they learned that Napoleon was heading straight to conquer it, which caused him to retreat because his army had no food. Walt Disney actually hated Goofy and believed his cartoons were stupid, but the character remained because animating him gave many people work. Every time an armadillo has babies, they are born as identical quadruplets. In fact, this occurs specifically with the nine-banded armadillo, whose reproduction includes a process called polyembryony, where a single fertilized egg divides into four genetically identical embryos. As a result, the offspring are the same sex and share exactly the same genetic information. In the 1970s and 1980s, LEGO produced a line of plastic bricks made exclusively for professionals, architects, and engineers called Modulex. During the 1850s, the city of Chicago was raised approximately 1 foot due to flooding and muddy terrain. Dirt was added to the streets to raise them, and even entire buildings were lifted to elevate them. There was a 20-year patent on mini-games during loading screens in video games. It only recently expired. Because of this patent, loading screens only had text or boring images. The University of Paris existed for 820 years, from 1150 to 1970. It was closed because it was the main place where there were revolutionary students who almost overthrew the French government in 1968. The smelliest cheese in the world is Pont l'Evêque, which has been made since the 13th century. If you put it in the refrigerator, it can make it smell bad for a very, very long time. If you were to observe how an object enters a black hole, no matter how closely you watch or for how long, you would never manage to see it due to time dilation. Every day, approximately between 150,000 and 200,000 new .com domains are registered worldwide. It is believed that the deep web, the place you should never go, is 400 or even 500 times larger than the surface internet. When Christopher Columbus discovered America, more than 90 million people were already living throughout the continent. It was 1/3 of the entire world's population. Thanks to 3D printing, NASA can send new parts or equipment to the International Space Station by email in the form of files, instead of having to wait months for them to be sent. The full name of the Barbie doll is Barbara Millicent Roberts. She was introduced in 1959 by the company Mattel and, according to her official story, was born in Wisconsin. Over the years, she has had multiple professions, from astronaut to president. Nintendo sold more Switch consoles in its first year of existence than all the Wii U consoles that were sold during its entire 4-year life cycle, more or less. Prisoners at Alcatraz, which is on an island, always had hot water for bathing. They did this so they would not get used to cold water and be able to escape by swimming easily. The man who invented waterbeds could not patent them because they had already been mentioned in science fiction novels. The modern design was developed in the 1960s by Charles Hall as a university project. Although he managed to popularize them commercially, prior references in literary works complicated some legal aspects related to the originality of the concept. Apollo 11 only had 20 seconds of fuel available when it landed on the moon. During the descent, several alarms forced a search for a safer area, which consumed more time than expected. Finally, Neil Armstrong managed to set the module down with only a few seconds of margin before the automatic abort would have been triggered. Skipping breakfast does not actually contribute to weight gain, health problems, or lower sports performance. But it is still not recommended, because when else during the day can you eat cereal out of a cup? Just saying. The engine of the BMW M5 is so quiet that the car plays fake engine sounds through the speakers to remind drivers that they are driving. The written history of the Mayan civilization, the Mayan codices, were almost entirely destroyed during the 16th century. That is why we now know almost nothing about that civilization. During the Second World War, Soviet scientists defended the largest seed vault in the world for 900 days. Many of the scientists refused to eat some of the fruits and crops in the reserve so as not to put Russia's future at risk. Based on a study conducted on 6,000 people, it was discovered that 1 out of every 3 men does not wash his hands after going to the bathroom. Do not be part of that statistic, please. Not even the most advanced computers that exist can generate the number of operations needed to calculate how to run properly on 2 legs. Glow sticks are based on the work of the scientist Edwin Chandros, who did not find out until 2013 that his invention was widely used at parties. Air pollution in China increases the likelihood of snowstorms in California. This happens because certain pollutant particles can travel thousands of miles through the atmosphere and act as condensation nuclei, favoring the formation of denser clouds. Pacific wind patterns allow these aerosols to influence even the climate of North America. China produces 68% of all the watermelons in the world. That is 20 times more than the second largest producer of this fruit. Thanks to its enormous agricultural territory and high domestic demand, the country overwhelmingly dominates the global market. Provinces with warm climates and intensive irrigation systems allow massive harvests each year, consolidating its leadership in global production. In the demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea, there are more than 1,600 plants and 300 uncommon fungi, and endangered species live there. When watermelons are cooked or roasted, their texture changes and they take on a consistency and appearance similar to meat. They can even be used as a meat substitute, except the watermelon flavor does not go away. Every minute, approximately 330 million emails are sent worldwide. That means that in a single day, billions of messages are exchanged. Although a large portion corresponds to advertising or spam, email continues to be one of the most widely used communication tools in businesses and digital services. The president of the soccer team, Real Madrid, did not want to sign Ronaldinho because, according to him, he was unattractive and did not help the company's brand image. Instead, they signed David Beckham because they believed he would be more profitable in Asia. Ronaldinho became a superstar at Barcelona and was once even given a standing ovation by Real Madrid fans. During the first year of the Xbox 360, the console had a 23.7% chance of failing with the red ring and becoming unusable. Thousands of consoles were returned. At that time, the Wii was 9 times less likely to break down. Cheetahs do not roar. They only meow and make sounds similar to those of a cat. Unlike lions and tigers, their larynx structure is different and does not allow them to roar. Instead, they emit chirps, purrs, and soft growls to communicate. This characteristic makes them closer to small felines than to the large predators they are often confused with. The Flintstones were for 30 years the most successful cartoon until The Simpsons arrived to take that spot. Premiering in 1960, it was the first animated series broadcast in prime time aimed at an adult audience. Its enormous popularity paved the way for other animated comedies to achieve the same cultural impact decades later. The Persians actually invented bagpipes, not the Scots. Wind instruments with an airbag have existed for thousands of years in regions of the Middle East, and there are ancient records in Persia and other nearby cultures. Over time, the instrument spread throughout Europe, and it was in Scotland where it adopted its most well-known form and became a national symbol. The 3 main characters in Grand Theft Auto 5 represent the 3 types of players that exist for this franchise. Michael represents those who already finished the game and now want to follow the rules. Franklin is like the traditional one who wants to learn and is very ambitious. Trevor represents the crazy ones who only like to create chaos with the freedom that this game provides. In 1931, a scientist tried to teach a baby chimpanzee to act like a human by raising it alongside his son. The chimpanzee never learned to use human vocabulary, and the experiment ended when the baby began imitating the primate's sounds. If you need to scan something but do not have a scanner nearby, you can use your phone. There are apps that can produce scanner-quality documents from photos like Cam Scanner. Just look them up. When musician Sun Ra once performed a show in a psychiatric hospital, he encouraged a patient to speak for the first time in many years. The patient walked toward his piano and exclaimed, "You call this music?" Portal 2 originally was not going to focus on portals during an early stage of development. Valve Corporation experimented with other mechanics, but when testers pointed out that the concept was losing its essence, the studio decided to return to the main idea. In the end, portals remained the heart of the game and its biggest appeal. Rabbits actually should not eat carrots. They wear down their teeth and cause digestive problems. Although cartoons always show them eating them, their ideal diet is mainly based on hay, leafy greens, and small portions of fresh vegetables. Carrots contain a lot of natural sugar and should only be given as an occasional treat, since their digestive system is very sensitive. In China, there are rehabilitation centers for people addicted to the internet. Some operate as strict boarding schools where young people surrender their devices and follow routines with exercise, psychological therapy, and military discipline. They emerged after internet addiction was recognized as a clinical disorder and have generated debate due to their severe methods. Video game designer Will Wright was inspired to create the popular game The Sims after he lost his house in a fire. He wanted to create a game that would emulate the experience of having to build his life from scratch again. Electronic Arts had to remove thousands of copies of the game Tiger Woods 99 PGA Tour from stores because someone decided to include a South Park episode hidden as a curiosity. Approximately 4% of all the cheese made in a year ends up being stolen. I suppose it is when people take pieces in the supermarket, or who knows why. The fighting game Wu-Tang Shaolin Style came with a controller included that was shaped like a W. Many people consider this controller to be one of the ugliest ever manufactured in history. Edna Mode, the superhero costume designer in the movie The Incredibles, is voiced by Brad Bird, the director of the film. Bird only did Edna's voice as a test during storyboard rehearsals, but he stayed because they could not find someone who did the voice better than he did. The office cubicle as we know it was invented in 1968 by Robert Probst to provide social privacy to workers. Humans are the only species that can throw objects with good accuracy. Princess syndrome is a term used in China and Korea to describe a psychological phenomenon that affects young women and is characterized by excessive narcissism, egocentrism, and a melodramatic personality, resulting in people who act like princesses. Puppies sneeze at others to let them know they are only playing and not seriously fighting. This behavior works as a social signal that reduces tension and prevents misunderstandings during rough play. Even some adult dogs use short, repeated sneezes to indicate that everything is part of the fun and not real aggression. When alcohol was banned on United States Navy ships in 1914, they held one last party and invited ships from other countries to join. A few weeks later, many of the guests at the party would become rivals when World War I broke out. Barack Obama paid for campaign ads to appear inside the video game Burnout Paradise. During the 2008 presidential campaign, his team used dynamic advertising on virtual billboards in the game to reach young voters, taking advantage of new digital strategies in interactive media. Unlike many mammals, bears can see all the colors that we can see. Their vision is similar to human vision in terms of color perception, which helps them identify ripe fruit, distinguish vegetation, and detect prey more accurately. This ability is especially useful during the day, when they rely more on sight than on smell. Wilmer Valderrama bought the Vista Cruiser that appears in the series That 70s Show for only $500 when they finished filming the final episode. There is a symbol used to emphasize a sarcastic phrase or message. It looks like a spiral with a dot inside, and it is called the Sark mark. And I think we desperately need it. It is something that would do the internet a lot of good. I hope it comes back into fashion. In 2002, a man from Oxfordshire, England, legally changed his name to Mr. PlayStation 2. Very good name, Mr. PlayStation 2. In the Museum of the Central Intelligence Agency in the United States, there is a pipe designed to receive radio signals, carrying the vibrations from the jaw to the ears. Like flamingos and penguins, pigeons also produce milk, which is a very creamy fluid with which they feed their young in their first weeks. Cruise control in cars was invented by an engineer who was tired of his lawyer constantly speeding up and slowing down while they were talking. Margaret Thatcher was more proud of being the first Prime Minister of the United Kingdom with a university degree in science than of being the first female Prime Minister of that country. An episode of The Simpsons takes 6 months to be completed from the idea, the script, the recording, and all the way to animation and post-production. Outside the entrance of the Las Vegas airport, there is a special trash can so that people who forgot they were carrying drugs can throw them away before traveling. A man won a Nobel Prize in 1999 for inventing a flamethrower device for automobiles to prevent theft. If you spill diet soda on a surface, it will not become sticky because it does not contain sugar or corn syrup, although it does contain some acids such as citric acid, but it will not leave a mess like regular sodas. The classics by Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, are part of a story of 8 books. The other stories were lost forever over the years. In the neighborhood of Palmitas in Pachuca, Hidalgo, Mexico, there is a mural covering 20,000 square meters. Practically all the houses in the area are part of the gigantic mural. Unicorns are mentioned 9 times in the Bible. However, most of those references come from ancient translations into Greek and Latin that used the word unicorn to interpret a Hebrew term that probably described a wild animal with a single horn, such as the aurochs or some type of extinct ox, and not the mythological creature we imagine today. Bumblebees are the only type of bees that can pollinate a potato. This is because they perform a technique called buzz pollination, where they grasp the flower and move their muscles to release the pollen. Although other insects can visit the plant, bumblebees are the most efficient for this crop. Elastic Girl's motorcycle in The Incredibles 2 is completely electric, so it does not harm the environment, in case you were wondering. At one point in production, it was considered that Elastic Girl would transform into the motorcycle with her powers, but I think it turned out better this way. Cell phones have 18 times more bacteria than toilet handles or flush buttons. This is because we touch them constantly and rarely disinfect them. The heat they generate and contact with hands and surfaces promote the accumulation of microorganisms, so it is recommended to clean them regularly. Bebop and Rocksteady were added to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series in the 1980s because the toy company that made the turtles wanted to have more characters to sell. Only 4 telephone booths remain in Manhattan, New York, and all of them are free. The Parliament of Iceland, established in the year 930, is the oldest active parliament in the world. We are at a moment in history in which the video game industry generates more money than the film and music industries combined. There is a place in Costa Rica called Territorio de Zaguates that is a giant dog refuge where they are not harmed and you can go visit whenever you want. Dogs always relieve themselves oriented specifically according to the magnetic field of planet Earth. When children in Uganda lose their baby teeth, instead of leaving them under their pillow to get money, they leave them for the tooth rat, who I do not think gives them that much money. Or maybe she does. When they returned to Earth, the members of Apollo 11 had to go through United States Customs because they were bringing objects from somewhere else. They had to declare the moon rocks they had collected. In Korea, there are entire cable television channels dedicated specifically to content from the video game StarCraft. It is very famous there. A study that was conducted discovered that plants can react to the sound of flowing water, growing and directing themselves toward where it is heard. Controlled experiments showed that certain roots tend to orient themselves toward specific vibrations associated with moving water, even without direct contact with visible moisture. Although they do not hear like animals, they do perceive environmental vibrations that influence their development. The Japanese diplomat Chiune Sugihara signed visas for more than 6,000 Jews in Lithuania in 1940. He spent all day for many days signing them. Even when he was leaving Lithuania, he continued signing and throwing visas out the window of a train as it was pulling away, like a total visa rock star. A host of a children's show called Soapy Sanders once asked kids to send him the pieces of paper with presidents' faces that their parents had in their wallets or purses, meaning money. Even though it was a joke, he was suspended for 2 weeks. Humans can run longer distances and for more time than any other animal on the planet. Although many animals are faster over short distances, our ability to sweat and regulate temperature allows us to maintain a steady pace for hours. This endurance was key for persistence hunting in prehistoric times. Accidents while trying to cut avocados have increased considerably this year compared to previous years due to the popularity of that fruit. People do not know how to cut them properly. In 1987, a bald eagle made its way to Ireland from the United States because it got lost, or maybe just wanted to go sightseeing. Since it was so tired, they had to fly it back by airplane. Just 1 year after humans arrived on the moon in 1969, people lost interest in space exploration, to the point that almost 90% of those surveyed did not remember the name of Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon. James Cameron made the movie Titanic mainly because he wanted to go down and see the shipwreck at the bottom of the ocean with the studio's money. He did not really care that much about making the movie. On the island of Capri in Italy, it is illegal to wear footwear that makes a lot of noise when walking, especially sandals. The rule seeks to preserve the tranquility of the island and avoid disturbances to residents and tourists in its narrow streets. In Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, every single clone was produced using digital effects. Although physical armor was used in earlier installments, for this film, they opted almost entirely for computer-generated characters, which allowed massive armies with coordinated movements and much more complex battle scenes to be shown. Tupac Shakur was the first artist to have an album reach #1 on the Billboard charts while still in prison. It was his third album, Me Against the World. Originally, SpongeBob was going to be called Sponge Boy, and the series would have been called Sponge Boy Ahoy. But everything changed when they discovered that the name Sponge Boy had already been registered as the name of a mop. If one day you decided to walk from North Korea to Norway, just casually, you would only cross one country on your way, Russia, and it would be about 4,660 miles of travel. In Texas, United States, there is what is called the smallest skyscraper in the world. When it was going to be built, the designer told investors it would have a size of 480. Everyone thought it would be 480 feet, but shortly after, they discovered it was 480 inches. They invested $200,000 in a 3-story building. It is scientifically proven that being in love makes you a much less productive person. Some studies in psychology have observed that the early stages of falling in love can increase distraction, reduce concentration, and raise levels of intrusive thoughts about a partner. However, in the long term, stable and satisfying relationships are usually associated with greater emotional well-being, which can also support performance. Every time someone falls in love, they lose on average 2 friends. Some studies on social dynamics have observed that when starting a romantic relationship, the time dedicated to close circles decreases, which can weaken certain bonds. Maintaining a balance between a partner and friendships helps preserve healthy support networks. Capybaras are the largest rodents in the world. They are the size of a large dog and can weigh up to 110 pounds. They live in wet areas of South America and are excellent swimmers thanks to their partially webbed feet. In addition, they are very social animals that tend to form large groups and communicate through whistles and soft grunts. After South Korean soccer player An Jong-hwan scored against Italy and eliminated them from the 2002 World Cup, his contract was canceled by Perugia, the Italian club where he played. Jason Brown, one of the highest-paid NFL players in 2009, quit after earning $25 million to become a farmer and donate his food. There are 44 cities in Russia that are closed. No foreign visitor is allowed to enter. In total, more than 1,500,000 people live in those cities. If you gather a group of 70 people, there is a 99.9% probability that 2 of them share the same birthday. The color of the cup or glass in which you consume a beverage can psychologically influence its taste or how strong it seems. For example, if the color of the coffee cup is brown, you might think it is stronger than it actually is. Nikola Tesla went to the park daily to feed the pigeons. He later realized that one of the pigeons that came with him every day had an injured leg and wing, so he spent more than $2,000 to build a device to help heal it. Tesla truly loved pigeons. Since your body absorbs photons of light, technically you weigh more when the light is on than when it is off. The energy of those photons has a mass equivalence according to physics, but the difference is absolutely tiny, far less than a billionth of a gram, so in practice it is impossible to notice. To make the movie The Nightmare Before Christmas, the stop-motion technique was used, which is moving the models frame by frame. To make 1 minute, they took a week. The entire movie took almost 3 years to film. The term quarantine comes from the Venetian Italian dialect and the words 40 giorni, which means 40 days. This became popular when it was discovered that ships were arriving loaded with rats carrying the plague, and they were made to wait 40 days at sea before touching land. Folk singer Willie Nelson released an album in 1992 made specifically to pay the debt he had with the tax office. The album was called The IRS Tapes, Who Will Buy My Memories? The IRS is the United States Tax Office. The Chivas Regal effect is when increasing the price of a product increases its sales, even though the product is the same in terms of quality. This happens because consumers are used to thinking that the more expensive a product is, the better it is, which is not always correct. In 1983, 90% of the media in the United States were controlled by 50 companies. Currently, 90% are controlled by only 6 companies. If you slide your finger to the left when you press delete on the keyboard of Android devices, you can delete words more quickly. It is expected that, thanks to joint efforts, the ozone layer will fully recover in 2075. Let us hope the planet still exists. If you own a Rolls-Royce, you can send your chauffeur to the brand's headquarters in Goodwood, England, where he will be trained with a special program called White Glove in order to drive one of those luxurious cars. The domain www.youtube.com was registered on February 14, 2005. The registration took place shortly before the site began operating publicly and marked the beginning of a platform that would transform the way video is consumed and shared on the internet. Months later, the first video would be uploaded, ushering in a new digital era. An oyster just 5 centimeters long can filter up to 50 gallons of water in a single day. While feeding, it continuously pumps water to capture plankton and microscopic particles, which helps improve water clarity. That is why oysters play a key ecological role in estuaries and coastal areas. The black mesh on microwave oven doors is not just there for decoration. It is there to block the microwaves that heat the food, which are actually so large that they cannot pass through those holes. Kobe Bryant's grandmother only went to see him play once in his entire career. That day, he scored 81 points against the Toronto Raptors. The largest warehouse that the online store Amazon has is the size of 17 football fields. These fulfillment centers can exceed 1 million square meters and operate with thousands of robots that move entire shelves, speeding up the preparation and shipping of millions of orders each year. NASA wanted to send Big Bird from Sesame Street into space on the Space Shuttle Challenger so that children would become interested in space, but the costume was too large and took up too much space. So instead, they sent teacher Krista McAuliffe. As we know, the Challenger exploded minutes after takeoff. Chocolate milk is more effective at recovering energy than most energy drinks that exist. Its combination of carbohydrates and protein in a balanced proportion helps replenish glycogen and repair muscle after exercise. It also provides natural electrolytes such as potassium and calcium, which makes it popular among athletes after intense workouts. The easternmost point within the territory of Brazil is closer to Africa than the westernmost point in the same Brazil. The moon also has quakes, and since it has a smaller core than Earth, the effect makes the entire satellite ring like a bell. Astronauts from the Apollo missions placed seismometers that recorded prolonged vibrations, some caused by meteorite impacts and others by gravitational interaction with Earth, which made the seismic waves resonate for several minutes. Even though the movie Scott Pilgrim is considered a cult film because of its large number of fans, it did not manage to recover its $85 million budget. It lost $10 million even after counting revenue from DVD and Blu-ray sales. The movie Moana is called Oceania in Italy. The name change was made because in that country, Moana Pozzi, an adult film actress, was already very well known. To avoid uncomfortable associations and confusion in the Italian market, the distributor decided to choose a different title. In Bangkok, Thailand, a new trend emerged in which young people get tattoos and identify as Mexican gangsters. They also wear the clothing and hairstyles characteristic of that group. The company and the domain Netflix.com have existed since before Google. Netflix was founded in 1997 and Google about a year later. The number of stars on the European Union flag does not represent anything. There are 12 stars, and they were chosen as a number without political association and as a symbol of unity. Once Bill Gates at a conference opened a jar full of mosquitoes with malaria. Just when chaos was about to break out, he said those mosquitoes did not have anything, that it was a joke. Holding bills in your hands like in a rapper's music video can help reduce stress and pain levels. In Los Angeles, United States, there are oil wells in the middle of the city, but they are not noticeable because they are disguised as sculptures or fake office buildings. There is a botanical garden in England dedicated exclusively to poisonous plants. Each plant has a plaque explaining all the bad things it can do to you. This place was created to attract more children who considered it boring to look at normal plants. King Ludwig II of Bavaria built many impractical castles throughout Bavaria in Germany. Those castles served as inspiration for the fairy tale castles in Disney theme parks. In countries where alcohol is prohibited, which still exists in some parts of the world, there are 3.5 times more car accidents caused by drivers under the influence. In Japan, it was illegal to dance in nightclubs after midnight, unless the establishments had a special permit. The ban lasted 67 years, until it finally ended in 2015. During the inauguration ceremony of the new terminal at the Ottawa airport in 1959, one of the aircraft in the show decided to exceed the speed of sound and caused a sonic boom that shattered all the airport windows and caused structural damage. The opening had to be postponed for another year. In New Delhi, India, if a tree gets sick from pests or falls down, an ambulance arrives to treat it. This has been done since 2009, and it takes 4 people to do the job. Jan Martinborough became a professional race car driver after beating more than 90,000 people in the video game Gran Turismo. 3 of the 4 members of Metallica had to divorce their wives during the recording of the celebrated Black Album because of the problems caused by how long and complicated the production was. Emily Blunt suffered from chronic stuttering during her adolescence. Now that she has overcome it, she became a member of the American Institute for Stuttering. Pit bull dogs are among the most affectionate and least aggressive breeds that exist. They are only aggressive when trained for dogfighting or for security. Australia has more than 10,000 beaches along its extensive coasts. You could visit one each day for 27 years without repeating. Its enormous coastline, which exceeds 34,000 kilometers, includes everything from tropical beaches to wild, nearly uninhabited shores. There are more than 10,000 underground nuclear shelters in Beijing, China, that were built during the Cold War. They were later sold as real estate, and currently more than 1 million people live in them. A man named Troy Howard has the only recording that exists of Super Bowl #1. Television networks did not keep it. When he asked for $1 million for the recording, they only offered him $30,000 and later withdrew the offer. But they threatened to take legal action if he dared to sell it to anyone else. CDs, DVDs, and Blu-rays are read from the inside out, which is the opposite of how vinyl records are read. There is a baby in Colombia named Netflix de Jesus Rodriguez Restrepo, and I think we already know what his parents were doing when he was conceived. Footprints found in a cave in France, belonging to a child and alongside them those of a dog or a wolf, suggest that due to their age, the relationship between dogs and humans began much earlier, even before the last ice age. Gym weights contain more bacteria than toilet seats. Studies that analyzed commonly used surfaces found that dumbbells and barbells can accumulate microorganisms due to sweat and constant contact. That is why it is recommended to clean them before and after using them to reduce the risk of skin infections. The Kitti's hog-nosed bat, or bumblebee bat, is the smallest mammal in the world. It lives in Myanmar and Thailand and, unfortunately, is an endangered species. If you gathered all the animals on planet Earth, including humans, and combined them into a single mass of animal matter, 15% would be ants. There are around 10 quadrillion ants. Recent studies estimate that their biomass is comparable to that of all humanity, which demonstrates their enormous ecological impact in almost every terrestrial ecosystem. Scientists are working to create lab-grown milk, with which products such as cream, cheese, and ice cream can be made for vegans, or for anyone who wants to consume them. If they succeed, carbon gas pollution will also be reduced. Mexico was at war with France in 1838 because they refused to pay 600,000 pesos to a French chef after some police officers looted his pastry shop. The conflict is now known as the Pastry War. 40% of the buildings in Manhattan could not be built today. They do not meet the minimum construction requirements of the area. When your sneakers come untied on their own, without doing anything more than walking, it happens because the laces experience accelerations of up to 7G with each step you take. In the 18th century, you could pay your admission ticket to the London Zoo by bringing a cat or a dog to feed the lions. Good thing they changed that, and now you only have to bring 1 kilogram of beans. The most searched tutorial on YouTube is how to kiss. For years, searches related to kissing, relationships, and romantic advice have been among the most popular on the platform, especially among younger users. Although trends constantly change, topics linked to personal curiosity and human relationships tend to rank very high in global search rankings. The song Mr. Brightside by The Killers has not left the United Kingdom charts since it was released. For some reason, it has remained in the top 50. A man opened a restaurant and said it was the #1 in London by inventing 5-star reviews on websites. In reality, he only served microwave-prepared food. His customers claimed it was the best food they had ever tasted. Once a guide dog named Roselle helped her blind owner go down 78 flights of stairs. It took them an hour to descend, but they made it out safely and nothing happened to them. The city of Los Angeles uses 96 million plastic balls to prevent water from evaporating. They simply place them there, saving enough water for 8,000 people each year. In 1989, billionaire Richard Branson launched a hot air balloon shaped like an extraterrestrial spacecraft and hired a person to dress up as E.T. and come out to scare whoever was nearby when it landed. In the year 2000, Michael Jackson entered the Guinness World Records for being the star who has made the most charitable donations. He gave more than 300 million to charity. There is a forest where more than 40,000 trunks actually belong to the same tree, connected by an intricate root system that is 80,000 years old. A type of Tamagotchi was almost banned because it had a mini-game similar to casino slot machines. It was said that it could turn children into future gambling addicts. If you were to shrink the solar system in such a way that the sun were your head and Pluto's orbit were at your feet, Uranus would be exactly where you imagine. Dogs can be allergic to humans, specifically to human dander. If your dog has allergies and undergoes treatment, it should be kept away from people with poor hygiene for almost 12 months. 10% of ancient tools that have been found are designed to be used by left-handed people. That means the proportion of left-handed people has remained the same over the last 10,000 years. The reason why vampires cannot see themselves in mirrors is that mirrors used to be made with a layer of silver inside, which is no longer done now. So it is likely that vampires could see themselves in a mirror nowadays. Do not trust anyone. It is possible to use Cheetos as a match or as a torch due to their high oil content, and not because they are made of plastic. Since they are made from cornmeal and vegetable oils, they can burn for a few seconds if lit. That combustion is due to the concentrated fat, which acts as fuel, not to synthetic materials in their composition. A domino tile can knock over another tile 1.5 times larger. Based on that, if you start with a tile the size of an atom, after only 74 steps, you could knock down the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa, with a tile 1.2 kilometers tall. Do not try to understand it. On average, a supernova explosion occurs every 50 years in the Milky Way, while in the observable universe, 30 happen every second. Although in our galaxy they are not always visible from Earth due to interstellar dust, astronomers estimate that frequency based on stellar remnants and models of stellar evolution. On a cosmic scale, the enormous number of galaxies makes these explosions relatively common events. According to scientific studies, dogs most likely dream about their owners when they sleep. Research on canine sleep shows that they go through phases similar to human REM sleep, which is associated with dreaming activity. Since a large part of their lives revolves around the people they live with, it is logical that their dreams include everyday scenes with them. The ocean floor has an average depth of 4 kilometers. The global average depth is around 3,700 meters, although in some areas, such as ocean trenches, it exceeds 10,000 meters. These extreme regions remain little explored and harbor life forms adapted to enormous pressure and complete absence of light. Newly hatched ducklings usually follow the first animal or the first thing they see that moves. They are programmed to follow their mother. But sometimes they end up following other things. Perfumes were made to fight the plague. It was believed that the disease spread through foul-smelling air. In 1982, Universal Studios sued Nintendo because, according to them, Donkey Kong had similarities to King Kong. They lost the lawsuit, and the court also found a King Kong game that violated Nintendo's copyright. German prisoners of war in Canada were treated so well that after the war, many returned to become Canadian citizens. The original recordings of the Apollo 11 mission were erased and reused by mistake. Chef Gordon Ramsay once lost an onion chopping contest. He was beaten by a cook from a prison. After seeing that, Gordon offered him a job at one of his restaurants. The abbreviation OMG, which stands for Oh My God or God, was first used in a letter that a woman sent to Winston Churchill in 1917. It was discovered after research at the University of Oxford. It was previously believed that it had first been used on an internet forum in 1994. Robert Downey Jr. and Benedict Cumberbatch, who are Iron Man and Doctor Strange respectively in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, have in common that both portrayed Sherlock Holmes at some point. There are dehydrated water cans from a brand called Bernard. They are a real product, but were made as a joke so that store owners who wanted to be funny could put them on display. If you find yourself in a situation where you are in a car that is sinking, you can use the metal bars in the headrests of the seats to break the window and escape. In China, there is a solar power plant shaped like a giant panda. It was designed that way to promote the use of renewable energy and attract public attention. From the air, you can clearly see the panda's dark patches formed by strategically arranged solar panels. Judy Garland had to be on a diet while filming The Wizard of Oz. Her diet consisted of chicken broth, coffee, and 80 cigarettes a day. At that time, she was 16 years old. In London and in New York, there are buildings that are only facades. They are made to cover maintenance areas for the subway systems. It is scientifically proven that sandwiches prepared by someone else taste better. This is because watching it being prepared reduces interest. That is why cereal in a cup is better. Alfred Hitchcock appeared in 39 of the 52 films he directed. His cameos became so famous that they started placing them earlier in the movies so people would not lose interest in the story. The Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas has more rooms and can accommodate more people than the entire population of Bellagio, Italy, the city. The Romans were the first to put the image of a living person on a coin. It was Julius Caesar who placed his portrait on a coin after winning a war more than 2,000 years ago. It is possible to navigate YouTube in 75 languages. That covers 95% of the world's population. JanSport backpacks are famous because they offer a lifetime warranty and can replace them years after you bought them if they have any defect. To calculate the position of the space probe Voyager 1 at more than 12 billion miles away, you only need to use the first 15 digits of pi to get an accuracy of 1.5 inches. Easy. The movie Clue from 1985, which is based on the board game of the same name, was distributed with 3 different endings in different theaters. When people talked about the movie, they were very confused. Vikings never actually wore horned helmets, as they are commonly portrayed in illustrations. Their helmets were very normal. The image of horns became popular in the 19th century thanks to theatrical productions and operas that sought to make them more striking. Archaeological findings show practical helmets made of iron or leather, designed for protection and not to get in the way in combat. There is a machine in the Moscow metro in Russia that exchanges 30 squats for a ticket to ride. It was installed after the Winter Olympic Games in Sochi. Humpty Dumpty was not actually an egg. In the traditional rhyme where he first appeared, that is never mentioned, but people collectively accepted it because it was better for an egg to fall from the top of a wall than for a person to fall. A party yacht with 60 people on board capsized because all the passengers moved to one side after passing by a nude beach. Fortunately, they all survived. In the 80s, people could download video games through a radio transmission, recording the sounds onto a cassette that they could later play on their computers. The oldest known cat video was filmed in 1894, and you can find it on YouTube. The Lego factory in Denmark is so automated that when you buy a Lego set, you are the first human to see and touch those plastic bricks. South Korea is the country with the highest number of plastic surgeries per capita in the world. It is estimated that 1 out of 4 women in Seoul has had some cosmetic procedure or surgery. Most internet traffic is generated by bots from Google and Bing, for example, or by malware collecting information. Cheetos are designed to melt in your mouth, making your brain think that you are not consuming calories. That is why you never get tired of eating them. Ancient Romans thought pants were effeminate. They preferred to wear their tunics, which they considered more masculine. In fact, they associated pants with northern barbarian peoples, such as the Gauls or the Germanic tribes. Over time, for practical and military reasons in cold climates, they also ended up adopting them. Garden gnomes a long time ago were real people whom the English hired to live in their gardens. Di Zhao Tong, the first man to successfully clone a fish, was forced to leave his research and become a janitor by the Chinese government during the country's Cultural Revolution. People throw more than 1 million euros each year into the Trevi Fountain in Rome, Italy. The money is used to subsidize a supermarket for those most in need. Cleopatra had a special red lipstick made for her from a mixture of ground ants and cochineal insects that produced the perfect shade of red. The average age of video game players is 31 years old, and their average experience is 14 years. This reflects how the gaming audience has grown alongside the industry, since many people started playing in childhood and continued into adulthood. Today, the market includes both young people and older adults. Alert in Canada, which is the inhabited place closest to the North Pole, is closer to Moscow than to Canada's capital, Ottawa. The video game Grand Theft Auto V earned $1 billion in its first 72 hours after its release. With that, it surpassed all other video games that have existed, and even the highest-grossing movies. Suzanne Collins, the author of the Hunger Games books, also wrote Clarissa Explains It All. Destiny was the first game from Bungie to be released for the PlayStation. Before that, Bungie only worked with Microsoft. There are blue bees. They are called Xylocopa cerulea, and they do not build honeycombs. They prefer to live inside tree trunks and inhabit Asia. Charles Darwin was the president of the Glutton Club at his university, where the goal was to find meat from rare animals to eat and discover new flavors. Later, when he went on his famous expeditions, he always tried to eat at least one of every animal he discovered. There is a museum of bad art. It is located in Somerville, Massachusetts, United States, and as its name suggests, inside there is a collection of art that is considered very bad. Shigeru Miyamoto said that he always had the idea that, in Zelda, Link would travel through time and serve as a link between the past and the future.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss more interesting content. Leave your comments and click on any of these videos. See you next time.